So for today's webinar, we're focusing on the designing of formative assessments in IBDP Chemistry. Although I understand that some of you here are actually teaching other subjects maybe, and so you could actually have some insights even though this is focused on IBDP Chemistry. Just a brief introduction again for those who are new. I'm Nerissa Puntawe, and I'm a certified trained international science educator with teaching experiences in Cambridge, IGCSE, AS level, A-level chemistry, global assessment certificate, and IBDP chemistry. I'm also an IBDP examiner for chemistry, and I have 8 years experience as IBDP coordinator, 10 years as Cambridge coordinator and exam officer. I'm a workshop training facilitator, and I have worked with Oxford University Press as an author, webinar speaker, and member of DP Science Research Panel. Okay, moving on. We have here an overview of what we're going to have today. So I divide into 4 parts. We will start with how our students assess in IBDP chemistry. Sorry, I forgot to turn on my camera. Sorry for that. Okay. Thank you, Saheli, for reminding. Okay, so to continue, what is the difference between formative and summative assessments? What formative assessments can be used in DP chemistry? And how are formative assessments designed in DP chemistry to maximize the potentials of DP students? So I have here a question that I'd like everyone to answer. Why do you think we need to assess our students? Why don't we just keep teaching and feeding them with information they need? Why do you think so? Please share your answers on the chat box. Okay, I can see some answers here from Dr. Omnea is to evaluate their learning or their understanding. Thank you very much for that answer. And Marvick Pantelion says to give us feedback if they're learning or not. Thank you. Maite says to monitor their progress. And Jacob answers to evaluate our teaching, which is good. We're not only evaluating the students, but we're also evaluating our teaching. Martha says assessment measures their level of comprehension. So I think we're referring to the students' comprehension. And Matsuanello says we assess our students in order to evaluate their progress in this subject. And of course, Kalyani says we know what skills they have gained after our teaching. Pankaj says to develop future assessments as its present learning outcomes. Okay, and Kevin says to evaluate whether learning is taking place. Okay, looks like all of you here understands what formative assessment is. Okay, but let's go over some of the information that maybe you'll have some insights after this forum, because I can see from your answers that looks like all of you are experts on formative assessments. Now, I would like you to watch this video and see how is the teacher assessing or checking on the students' learning progress.
Okay, guys, today we are starting something brand new. Before we start, everybody eyes on the whiteboard. We're going to go back a little bit in time. On your whiteboard, can you write 654 thousands, 289 ones in standard form. Standard form. 654,289 ones in standard form. When you think you have it, compare with your neighbor. If it's different, figure out why. And thumbs up to me when you and your partner both have it. Luke, you okay? I want it in standard form, sweetie. So Morella, help your partner. Does he have it in standard form? That's unit form. Put it in standard form. Morella, does he have it? Luke, does Morella have it? Excellent. Okay. Don't erase it. You should have 654,289. Now, can you write 245,164 ones in standard form? Don't erase. Don't erase. Add a new number. When you think you have it, check with your neighbor. Do you need a marker? Get your marker. 245,164. Thumbs up if you and your partner both have it. Good. Now, can you add both numbers using the standard algorithm? Can you add them both up using the standard algorithm? When you think you have the answer, check in with your partner. If it's different, figure out why. If you need to erase something and reline your numbers up, that's fine. Standard algorithm, go ahead and add them. Check in with somebody when you think you have it. Talk to each other. Jack, do you and Richie both have it? Then you don't have to whisper, boys. You could talk.
I have A's.
So do you guys have the same thing?
No.
So what are you going to do? Both of you got to talk it out and figure out what's up. Look at them carefully and see if you can figure out where somebody's wrong.
Oh, I think I put 255 here. That was wrong. So I'll figure this, make that 9. 8. There we go.
Do they match?
Yep.
You guys match? Thumbs up. I see lots of thumbs up so far. Great. Okay, erase.
Okay. So, how do you think is the teacher checking on the students' learning progress? Can you please share your comments about this video on the chat box? How will the teacher know that the students are actually learning? Anyone here? So yeah, thank you, Kalyani. They're doing a peer check and thumbs up. So the teacher doesn't have to go over the students' work, right? Because they're self-assessing, they're doing peer check, and they just have to raise their hands or thumbs up. From the video, they're doing thumbs up just to confirm if they're getting it or not, okay? And you've seen that this video is it's running only for like less than 5 minutes. So these active learning activity can actually be done to check on the progress. And you can apply this also in your classes. This is one way to integrate active learning, which we have discussed in the previous week, with applying it to formative assessment. Okay.
Boards.
Okay, moving on. So let's take a look at an overview of IBDP assessment. Now for IBDP assessment for this year, it's quite different. Actually, it's completely different from the previous years. This is the new one, and it will be examined this May 2025. So you can see here, of course, we have the standard level and higher level. And you can see, I summarized here the external assessment and the internal assessment. So there are two. For those who are new with this curriculum, external assessment is different from the internal assessment. An external assessment that would comprise the written exams, which the students have to take in May. And the internal assessment is done all throughout the course. They could start doing it from year 11, and then they will submit their work in year 12. Okay. Now, looking at this too, the difference between standard level and higher level would just be the length of the exam, and of course, the number of marks. So you can see for the external assessment, for standard level, that would be for 3 hours, while the higher level will have it for 4 hours and 30 minutes. And both of them will have paper 1 and 2. Paper 1 for standard level will have 55 marks. Paper 2 will be 50 marks against higher level having 75 marks for paper 1 and 90 marks for paper 2. Okay. So you can see here, the weights will just be the same for both standard level and higher level. This is different from the previous year wherein they're quite different, but here they're now making it the same. So for external assessments, it's 80%, and paper 1 is lower than paper 2. Paper 2 will be 44%. Internal assessment will be 20%. Now, why am I sharing this? Okay, it's very important that you, as a DP chemistry teachers, know and understand how are your students being assessed at the end of the course, right? Because if you don't understand how they're going to be assessed, then you won't know how to design your formative assessments. But then you might ask, sorry? Yes.
Yeah, Nadisa, sorry to interrupt in the middle. Can you stop sharing and reshare it? Because I think someone by mistake drew on the screen, so that the drawing will come throughout the session, all the recordings.
Okay.
I think. Oh, yeah, you can just stop sharing and reshare, then it will go off automatically.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. Wait. Okay. I think we're okay now. Thank you, Sahali. I thought it will just automatically be erased. Okay. There, let's see. Where did I stop? Okay, so like what I'm saying, it's important that we understand the summative assessments so we know how to design our formative assessments. Although you might be thinking like, okay, all the external assessments will just be paper 1, paper 2, it's just multiple choice. It's all written. Then why is there a need to vary the formative assessment? Why don't we just give the students the test, individual test, and let them practice? Okay. That is actually not a good idea, and I will explain later on why is there a need to vary the formative assessments and prepare students to prepare for their May examination and get higher scores. Now, the assessment objectives in DP Chemistry, okay, IB wants us that students can demonstrate their knowledge, understand and apply their knowledge, analyze, evaluate, and synthesize, demonstrate the application of skills necessary to carry out insightful and ethical investigation. Now, as teachers, you might say like, wait, this is quite familiar. Looking at the words, the command terms, demonstrate, apply, understand, analyze, evaluate, demonstrate, they're actually aligned with the Bloom's taxonomy. So all of you here are familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy. Okay. And in Bloom's taxonomy, you have here the different levels of thinking skills. The one at the bottom is the lowest cognitive skill, and the one on top of it would be the higher order thinking skill. So we have remember, understand, those are just the lower level of thinking skill, while to evaluate and create, that's the high order thinking skill. Now, what we want our students to develop would be to develop most of the higher order thinking skills, because that will benefit them not only in the exam, but also it will benefit them for their internal assessments. For those who are new with discipline taxonomy, or those who are quite struggling, like how can you design formative assessments in such a way that you could apply or integrate all these levels of thinking? You could look at this this reference that I posted here is from teachthought.com. So you can see you have, for remembering, the command terms would be defining, finding, listening, identifying, so it's memorizing. But if you look at, for example, applying, the students should be able to sketch, experiment, prepare, integrate, present, and for, let's say, for evaluating, they should be able to validate, criticize, they should be able to defend their answers, they should be able to predict and reflect. And for creating, this would be the high order, the highest of the high order thinking skill. That means they should be able to create something new, like, for example, role playing, solving, managing, okay, building, maybe designing their own experiments to solve a problem, something like that. So these are the different, you could just come up with different formative assessments using these command terms. Now let's have a 1-minute reflection. Are my assessments well designed? Am I assessing my students' higher order thinking skills? Or are we just limited to giving the students multiple choice or just understanding? Have we given them any assessment, a formative assessment that could measure their high order thinking skills? Please write your answers on the chat box and share it to the group. How are you assessing your students? Please feel free to write and share your ideas on how you were successfully assessing your students' higher order thinking skill in the form of a formative assessment. Okay, let's wait for some answers here. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Ammer. According to Dr. Ammer, asked them to design an investigation for comparing which acid is stronger. Thank you so much. That is definitely a higher order thinking skill, measuring higher order thinking skill, I mean. And Kalyani answered database question, which is good. It's a perfect preparation for paper 1B. We also have case studies. Thank you so much, Pankaj. Okay. And Jacob answered, I assess my students were a blend of multiple choice and essay type questions. Okay. The essay type would actually develop their thinking skill as well, their critical thinking skill, that would be fine. Ask them with illustration how to separate solution of soluble, insoluble salts. Thank you so much, Dr. Ammer. Okay, looks like some of you here have been assessing not only the lower thinking skills, but the higher order thinking skills as well. And you're giving your students the opportunity to develop the higher order thinking skills. You're doing a great job. Now let's take a look at the skills for IBDP chemistry. In IB, this is really different from other curriculum. It's very different because of the development of the approaches to learning skills. There are 5 approaches to learning skills, the ATLs, and you can see here we have the thinking skill, research skills, okay, self-management skills, communication skill, social skills. Now, all the skills are necessary for the students to be able to maximize their learning potentials. And you are strongly advised and encouraged to integrate all of these skills in every formative assessment that you have. You could maybe develop 2 or 3 in every formative assessment that you have. And aside from these skills, you have also to develop experimental techniques, technology, integrating technology, and mathematical skills of the students. So they will be more prepared when they're doing their internal assessments. And you can see at the center, you have their exploring and designing, collecting and processing data, and concluding and evaluating. This is the process for the internal assessment. So overall, what we want our students to be able to achieve is to be able to come up with a good quality of internal assessment. And they're doing this independently. Although they're working, maybe they can collaborate with some of their peers in collecting their data, but then they still have to come up with the paper and they have to write it independently. And in that way, you should be able to provide them with all the skills. Like what I said, it's not just the content, but you have to integrate all the skills that includes thinking, research, self-management, social communication, and experimental techniques, technology, and mathematics. And you might be overwhelmed and say, like, how are we going to do this? Because some of you might just be saying, like, okay, I have a syllabus, I have my course outline, and I only meet my students maybe 3 periods in a week. And you only have a limited time, but then looking at the content of the book or the course outline, it seems like you cannot really complete everything. I know some of the teachers are overwhelmed with that, but there's always a way, like it depends on how you design your formative assessment. Once you design it in such a way that you will develop the thinking skills of the students, especially the higher order thinking skills, then it will be faster for them and they will be able to maximize their learning potentials. Aside from this, of course, you know that in IB, we encourage the inquiry-based and conceptual understanding, applying conceptual understanding. Okay, so moving on, let's take a look at the difference between assessment for learning and assessment of learning. Now, these two are different, and I'm sure all of you here are familiar with this, so I don't really have to go deeper about the difference. So let's just have this diagram. What is the implication of this diagram shown? So you have there the wheels and how is the formative actually related to summative? Please share your comments or insights about this on the chat box. I would be glad to know what you think of this, because I was looking at like, why are there 2 purple, like this is sort of like a wheel, and then 1 big green one, which is a summative. So what's the implication of this diagram? Let's wait for the answers from the participants. Okay, please feel free to share your insights about this diagram? I'm sure for physics, you know how this works, right? So you can see the arrows and they're actually connected with each other. So what do you think is the implication of the diagram and relating it to the assessments? Please write your answers on the chat box so we could share it to everyone. Okay,
I think
thank you
Miss
so much.
Lena, 1 minute. Miss Lena has raised her hand. Maybe she wants to speak to you. Yes,
Okay,
please feel free to unmute and speak. Miss Lena.
Okay, thank you. This is Lena.
Yes.
What I think about this diagram is that no matter the amount of several amounts of formative assessment, they will make up the formative. So if you can give test 1, test 2, test 3, they are all formative. Then at the end, all those will culminate as the formative examination or assessment.
Okay, thank you so much, Lena. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we have here from, let's see, Martha says formative assessment is continual. Thank you so much. After every unit, so it's continuous. And says summative happens after consolidating all formative. That's a very good analysis of that diagram. And Dr. Ammer says we should integrate formative throughout the learning process to enhance student understanding and prepare them for summative assessments. Instead of seeing summative assessment as the end point, it should be used to reflect on and improve teaching and learning strategies. Thank you so much for that. And also, Kevin says it starts with formative. That's right. Then summative. Otherwise, students won't do well. Thank you. Right. So we always have to start with formative, and it's actually a continuous process. It's an ongoing process. Then it's actually preparing them for the summative. So we cannot just immediately jump to the summative part, right? And this is the big mistake of some educators because they're rushing, they have to come up with records as required by their admin or management. They need to have records of summative and they will forget about the formative, right? Because they are required to. So that's one pressure that they have to complete, right? And also because they don't have enough time, they will not be able to, design some formative and they will just keep on transferring, sharing the knowledge to the students without checking on the progress of the students. Okay, so there's no learning actually. And that's the reason why the students are actually not learning and not their potentials are not maximized. Okay, thank you for your answers. Okay, and the last one here, formative assessments are to prepare learners for the summative, which is usually at the end. Thank you. So it can also be explained by this picture wherein there's an evaluation, formative, summative. You can see for a chef, the formative part would be to do trial and error, to come up with the best recipe and be able to, produce something like a food meal of good quality. Okay, same thing with the students. We want to prepare the students, okay, to do good, like to excel in their exam, in the May examination, which is actually the aim of most of the students, right? We have to be honest. They want to have a score of 7, right? And everyone would be working towards that. But then, of course, along the process, they're not only preparing for that paper, but they're also developing the skills. We also have to make sure the skill development is there. right? It's not just answering the questions in the May examination. Okay, so let's take a look at the difference. So I'll go fast on this one. Assessment for learning, we have, that's the formative assessment, and learners engage with various tasks, activities, and questions designed to assess their knowledge and skills, and these are aligned with specific learning goals. And learners' responses to this series of activities, it provides critical insights into their understanding and abilities, and informs learners of their learning progress through quality feedback. So you can see for the assessment for learning, there should be various tasks designed, and it's always aligned to the learning goals. It's not just a random assessment, and it's measuring their understanding, abilities, and the feedback is provided at the end. What's the role of the teacher? The teacher should know the learning goals, should be able to communicate the learning goals to the students. So usually at the start of the class, you have this hook and would have to communicate, like at the end of this class or this discussion or this period, maybe you should be able to, like, we have to have that procedure. So the students should know the endpoint of that discussion. Why are they learning the concept? Okay. And the teachers need to design questions and tasks to check the students' understanding. Then they have to decide how feedback is provided. So feedback doesn't always have to come from the teacher. There are always different ways, like peer check and so on. It could be self-assessment. They also have to plan opportunities for learners to use the feedback provided on the assessment to further progress. So after the formative assessment and the students are given feedback, then the teachers have to again plan for another assessment to make sure that the students can apply what they have learned or what the feedback that they were provided with. So it's more of a scaffolding. So formative assessments are linked to each other. For summative assessments, this is the assessment of learning. It helps students evaluate students' achievement and inform instructional practices. It's commonly conducted at the conclusion or at the end of an instructional period and aims to determine what students have learned in relation to specific learning objectives, right? And the role of teacher is to incorporate range of assessment types. So it's not just focused on one type of assessment, but these should all be aligned with the learning outcomes. And that teachers need to engage in thorough analysis of the data, the results from the test or assessments, and identify the trends, like where are the students failing, or what are the strengths of the students, which areas need to be reviewed, to be revised again with the students, or this is also used to inform future instructional strategies. Now, the teachers also need to share the assessment results with stakeholders, including the students and parents, to foster transparency and support student growth. Some teachers actually avoid this part. Why? Because some parents, maybe some students, would demand for a higher score, or they would question the scores, or they might question how their papers were marked. But again, we have to be transparent and we have to share the results and with objectivity. We cannot be subjective, especially when we are marking the papers, right? So that is one of our roles, right? To be objective, and we should not be, favoring students or some parents, right? So transparency is very important. Now let's take a look at the formative assessments in DP Chemistry. This one, I just created it on my own. It's based on what I have been using in my classes. You can take some from this one, but you could also grab from other resources. So I grouped them, classified them based on the kind of assessments. I have here individual assessments, participation in class discussions, group activities, and reflective activities. So for individual assessments, we have here 1 minute writing, which I have presented last week, right, in the active learning. And homework, quizzes, worksheets are commonly given to the students. Now, in class discussion, you can have the flipped learning discussion, which, for example, in the flipped learning, you have asked the students to read or maybe watch a video and you gave them guide questions. And when they come back to class, then you can have the class discussion. Or you can ask the students to answer questions, or they could ask each other some questions. So this is more of a participation during class discussion, which you can see, like you can look at the progress of the students learning. Now for group activities, you could have experiments, peer teaching, think, pair, share, case studies, gallery walk, and so on. So there are a lot of group activities that you can do. And I've shared some from the previous forum we had last week. You could integrate those into these group activities. It also depends on how many students you have, how, like maybe you only have 2 students or maybe as huge as 25 students. So you can vary your formative assessment depending on the number of students. Now, the last one is reflective activities. Now, this part, usually the teachers are forgetting on giving these reflective activities. This is the exit tickets. When you ask the students to just write what they have learned that day, 1 minute writing maybe to answer some questions, or muddiest point where they write what topics they're struggling with, or maybe you could give them some self-check or self-assessment. So it's very important that you vary your formative assessments. So let's get away from being a traditional teacher of just giving quiz and worksheets. So we have to make it more interactive, right? Let's, like what I've mentioned a while ago, we need to be able to develop their students' research skill, thinking skill, social skills, self-management, and research skills. And if you vary your formative assessments, then you will be able to develop all those skills. Now let's have a reflective pause here. What type of formative assessments do you usually give to your students? So I'll be waiting for your answers. Please share specifically the formative assessments that you usually or commonly give your students. Okay, thank you, Pankaj. That's iClicker questions. That's integrating technology. Okay, Maite, oral quiz, that would be great. Okay, so they don't really have to write. You can just call on them one by one. A project, good, Kevin. Maybe you're doing a project once in a month or once in a term, right? Quizzes, homework. Okay, thank you, Jacob. Okay. So we have common formative assessments here. iClicker, oral quizzes, individual work quiz, exit. Okay, Kalyani, thank you so much. You're doing an exit sleep, 1 minute summary. That's a very good practice though, to give the students 1 minute summary at the end so that they could try to recall everything before they leave the class. End of topic test. Okay. I think Jacob, your end of topic test would be like a quiz at the end, right? Before they leave the class. Thank you. Okay, they have, thank you, Lena, that's individual work quiz and project. Thank you so much for sharing all of those formative assessments. And right, there's a reflection, like what Marivic Pantalian mentioned, exit ticket, reflection after class. Now, when you're designing formative assessments, we have to make sure that we're giving them varied ones so they won't get bored with their class, and that they will not be able to predict what you're doing every meeting. Because if you're doing the same thing like giving them quiz or giving them worksheet, it's so predictable that they might get bored and you will lose their attention maybe, and they might disengage, right? So having some variation like oral quiz maybe, or clickers, integrating technology, okay, that would be good. So let's take a look at the formative assessments that I have designed in my classes. Okay, this one I will be sharing some of the practices I've done, and you will see that I have integrated the active learning that I have discussed last forum. Okay, so here we have for topic structure 3.2, functional groups, classification of organic compounds, with a subtopic nomenclature of organic compounds. I think I mentioned this last time. So this is more on the naming of the organic compounds, which is limited to the following functional groups. We have halogeno, hydroxyl, carbonyl, and carboxyl. So this is a formative assessment preparing the students for paper 1A. Okay, this is the multiple choice. All right, so the students are provided with mismatch. Again, there are names and structures, and the names and structures given to them are like strips of papers, all placed in a brown envelope maybe, and then it depends if you want them to work by pairs maybe, or you want them to work in smaller groups. It depends on how big your class is. So it's your option. You can design it. So as long as they're taking the role of investigating team, and you give them 4 examples of each functional group, the structures will have 2 to 6 carbon atoms, not more than that, because for IB, it's not really, they don't really give more than 10. And the structures can be in the form of condensed formula, skeletal formula, or structural formula. So for this activity, you have to give the students limited time, and in that way, you are developing their self-management, right? And if they're working by threes, right, and so they will have to collaborate, and they're developing not only their thinking skill, but their social skills, okay? And so now when they're doing this case study, they will have to organize everything in a concept map. Now, concept map can be in the form of a mind map. It could be an organizer. It depends. As long as you could ask them to put their answers on a poster. Now, what I'm doing in my class is, because if you ask them to just post it, like put all those papers, organize it in a poster, if you ask them to put that poster on the board, it's too small that not everyone from the class can see it, right? So what I do usually is to ask them to take pictures, and then they present it as a slide, right? And so when they're presenting, they can just zoom on it. It depends on how they do it. And then they could explain. They have to do the student-led discussion. They have to justify their answers. So this is a good way for you to just sit at the back and check on their understanding. And this is one of the formative assessments that you could also apply in your class. It doesn't really take so much time, because the activity is only limited for, let's say, 10 minutes, and they have to work fast, and their presentation can only take like maybe 3 to 5 minutes per group, okay? So they don't have to use up all the time, right? Another one would be a topic from reactivity 1.2, energy cycles and reactions, and the topic is Hess's law. Now, in this topic, we have a learning outcome to apply Hess's law to calculate enthalpy changes in multi-step reactions. So same thing, what I'm going to do here, so what actually I did in my class is the students will have a multiple choice question. So I have to provide them with 5 sets of questions. And this can be done individually or by pairs. Again, it depends on the size of your class. Now, 4 corners means you have to post the letters on 4 corners of your room. And then each question is time limited. Now, the teacher can read it, but usually this is posted on the board through the slides. So you have to post the question and the students have to answer it for, let's say, 2 minutes. It depends on how long the question is. And then they have to go to, when you say stop, and they have to move to that corner, depending on their answer, okay? Once they're in that corner, they have to make sure that they can justify their answer because they have to collaborate with the other students. And then they will have to convince the other groups or other students to join them by justifying their answer. So when you look at that, I mean, when you're observing the students justifying your answer, justifying their answers, then you will know, you will be able to figure out who among them are still lost with the topic, right? And who are already confident with their learning, okay? So again, in this case, you're just facilitating their learning and there's so much interaction happening. But then this is another form of formative, which is preparing them for paper 1A. Another one is reactivity 2.2, which is about how fast the rate of chemical change. The subtopic is reactivity 2.2.3, and this focuses on the factors that influence the rate of reaction, which includes pressure, concentration, surface area, temperature, and presence of a catalyst. For this one, I asked the students to do a case study and peer review. So this is to prepare them for paper 1B. We know that paper 1B for the May examination is different because this will be assessing their skills, experiment skills, and how they answer database questions. It is quite similar to the previous exam papers from the previous years, which is the first part of paper 3. Okay, quite similar. Now, to be able to develop that skill, the students should be able to design experiments and they should be able to collect data and process the data as well as to evaluate it. So in this case, when I did this with the students, they have to choose one factor only to investigate. And then they will be working in groups. They have to design the experiment. They have to do the experiment by themselves, collect the data, process it, and at the end, they have to present this processed data to the class. Now, everyone knows about the rubrics, right? For the IA rubrics. The students now, the other groups will have to assess their peers through the peer review and assess them based on the rubrics. Okay, so this is helping each other learn and understand the IA rubrics, as well as preparing them for paper 1B. Moving on, we have here topic on reactivity 2.1, how much, the amount of chemical change, and subtopic would be percentage yield calculations. So we have explaining periodicity of atomic radius, ionic radius, ionization energy, affinity, electronegativity. This is actually a lot of learning outcomes. And sometimes this can be quite overwhelming, right? So how could we come up with a formative assessment that could be done in just one period of a class that could measure all of these outcomes? Okay, so I designed this active learning strategy as my formative assessment to prepare the students for paper 2. Okay, so we have here peer teaching and gallery walk. So like what I discussed last forum about the gallery walk, this is they have to come up with a poster. So the teacher designs paper to questions, and the group is divided, I mean the class is divided into 5 groups. Each group will be given one question focused on one concept only. Now, the students have to answer the question at a limited time, maybe 5 minutes, and then they have to write it on a poster-sized paper, post it on the wall, and then they will apply the gallery walk, right? So that's one way of also developing their creativity, their communication skill, of course, their thinking skill, and social skill as well, okay? Now we have here structure 1.4, counting particles by mass, the mole. This is the easiest one. Okay, this is about empirical formula. But then when you're having this topic, sometimes this is the first quarter topic, right? And some of their students are just coming, fresh from maybe from MYP, from IGCSE. It depends on the curriculum where they came from grade 10, right? And they have varied learning skills. Some of them might be quite slow, some might be fast. So in this case, I designed a different assessment which is differentiated. So I have to know the prior knowledge first of the students, of course, their levels, and I'll provide them with different questions with different levels. So I have here easy level, average, and challenging level. If you look at the easy level, they're just given a percentage composition by mass of 2 elements, okay? And they just have to determine empirical formula, right? Empirical formula or molar mass is given, and they have to determine the molecular formula. For the average level, you can give percentage composition by mass of 2 elements out of 3, and then they will have to determine empirical formula and, of course, a molecular formula. The challenging one would be a chemical reaction is described, like, for example, combustion, with identified amount of reactants or products, and the students have to determine the molecular and empirical formula. Now, for this case, you could apply think, pair, share, peer teaching, and they could end up with the gallery walk. But in this case, what I did is I applied democracy. Now, for some of you who are not familiar with democracy, the students are provided with 2 colors of dots, sticky dots, green one and a red one, and then they'll just go around and they will just have to put green if they think the answer is correct, the processing is correct, red if it's not correct, or you could give them also an orange dot that they're not sure of it, like they cannot really figure out if the answer is correct or not, right? So this is another activity, but this one is preparing the students for paper 2. Okay, so that ends our forum. Do we have any questions? I just hope that you got some insights. I know all of you are experts on designing formative, and I'm just hoping that you could make your classes more interactive. Like students now, they love to communicate, they love to socialize. So we have to get, like what I've said last forum, we have to get out of that, comfort zone of teachers of just being in front and doing the traditional way of teaching just to finish all the concepts. Okay. So let's see if we have some questions.
You can write in the chat box or you can unmute and ask as well. So anything is fine. Just feel free to ask if you would like to know anything or share your observations, suggestions, or anything that you like, or you want to share your experience. How are you inculcating this practice in your classroom or with your students? That would be awesome. And I have shared the feedback form to the chat box. Please fill the feedback form, and once you complete filling it, then you can exit the session. But we would love to hear from you as well. So feel free to share your thoughts.
Okay, Maite, I think would like to ask the question. Let's see.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I wanted to ask, since we'll be using Classically, which is an online platform, what are some of the formative assessments that we can avoid using that may not be as effective as it was a classroom setting?
Right.
Right.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again? I think I didn't get it.
Okay, my question is, what are some of the formative assessments that we as teachers can avoid using, since we'll be using Classical, which is an online platform? Like, what do you think are some of the formative assessments that won't be as effective when they are used on an online platform, unlike when they are used in a classroom setting? Maybe like right now I'm just thinking of a debate, right? Maybe grouping learners into groups of 2 or 4 where they can debate about a certain topic. You think that will be as effective on an online platform as it is in a classroom setting contact?
Okay, I think I got it. Like, so we are referring to an online class, is it?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
referring.
It's quite challenging for an online class. So yeah, I think for online classes, of course, you could always have interaction. They could always be in different rooms and they could collaborate. It's actually the same thing because they could always come up with their ideas and they could share, like they have Google Drive, they could still share their ideas together. So it's not as different as when they're doing face to face, right? I mean, there are so many apps that can be used. So yeah, I think it's still similar to having face to face. Did I answer the question, Maite?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Welcome. Are there any other questions? But that's very interesting because as of now, we're not doing online. Hopefully, we're not going to go back again to that online platform, which is quite scary for everyone. Okay. Let's see if we have. Okay, I can see from the comments here. You're welcome, everyone. It's really a great pleasure having you for this forum. Thank you so much for being very, for being active in this discussion. So I have here from Kevin, I think my take home is a lot, but most importantly, let's use various approaches in assessing learners formatively. That's right. Although I have an autistic student in my class, I have had challenges assessing her. Okay, so for the autistic, I think for IB, we do have some guidelines on special needs. And it's advisable that you have someone helping you understand, autistic student. I think like all the schools should have that, SEN expert. They could actually help on how you could handle the students. Sometimes autistic students are, from different, like they're not the same. Like some can be quite smart, So and yes, it could be challenging because if they're very smart, like I had, some students before, they want something more challenging. They can be bored, they don't want to interact, and so on. So my advice is, if you could have someone from, let's say, an SEN expert from your school, or if there's none, then you could ask, to maybe, to partner with another school, and have a network of chemistry teachers would be great. You can start with that. Thank you. Okay, Pankaj, you're welcome. Lena, okay. We have here, read my question. Let's see, there's a question here. Thank you for this insightful session. Can you throw more light on how the paper 1B and paper 2 will be? Okay, Jacob, thank you so much for that question. Paper 1B, if you look at the specimen, if you look at the past papers of paper 3, the option paper, the part A is similar to paper 1B, right? Paper 1B, there are 2 parts. So there's a database and experiment skills assessment. As for paper 1B, and paper 2 is just the same as a paper 2 before. It's an extended response. You're welcome, Marivic. Okay, thank you, Lena, that you learned a lot. Okay. Yes, we have to engage the students more and make it fun, because chemistry is actually fun to teach, right? And when the class is fun and they're engaged, they're more motivated to learn, and you can inspire them to excel. Okay. You're welcome, Matsuanello. Okay. You're welcome also, Kevin. So welcome everyone for, again, it's my pleasure to have everyone here. So I guess Classify will be publishing this as a recorded file, so you can just have it as a reference.
Yes, we will publish it on our YouTube channel, and we'll share the link as well with you all. So once we do that, we generally inform everyone on our Facebook page and LinkedIn official page as well. And you can go to the channel, you can visit, and you can also browse our past recordings as well of different editions of Classify Expert Exchange Forum. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Ms. Edisa, for the wonderful and insightful session. Thank you so much sharing all the ready-made strategies that you have shared, like topic wise, how can we implement formative assessment. That was very handy, and that is, I think, will help educators immediately implement in their classroom. So thank you so much for organizing the content so well. So it will definitely help all the educators who joined. Thank you everyone for joining. I'll just wait for 2 more minutes. I hope you all are filling out the feedback form so that we can issue certificates and we will send it to you.